Hey everybody, welcome back. Starting on our series for new teachers. Today we're talking about the dreaded greatest fear I find among most new teachers, and that's connecting with parents and students. It can be pretty intimidating. There's a lot of difference in the way that people do things. I'm going to tell you how I do it and what I find works. There's so many ways you can approach it. This is my way. I'm going to keep it pretty simple, generic. Obviously, there's a lot of nuance to it, but as a new teacher, it's really not as bad as you think. So, when I'm talking about making phone calls home, this is usually already after I've had discussions with the student, I've had discussions with an administrator or a guidance counselor. Calling home is not something that I actually have to do very often. I did it much more when I was a new teacher, and since then I really learned that it is better to try and take care of as much as you can in house in your classroom as possible before you go anywhere else. So, calling home is really one of the last things that I do. I usually would even contact my principal or vice principal or whoever is responsible for discipline or your student's well-being, depending on what the issue is that you need to contact home about. If it's something that is serious, obviously you want to go to your administrator. If it's something that you're more just kind of worried or you've noticed something in a student that you think has changed or something that's not really a discipline issue so much as a social behavioral issue, that's when you want to talk to a guidance counselor first. But really, what it comes down to is you need to talk to your student first. Don't be afraid to take them aside and have a frank conversation with them if it's a discipline issue, or if it's a issue that you think is more nuanced. Maybe they seem like they're really down, something like that. Don't try and force it out of them. That'll just make them shut down even more. You won't be able to talk to them. What you really need to do if you have a student that you're worried about and they don't really want to talk, you might not be their person. I've talked about it in a video before. You can't. Not all of them are going to enjoy your class. Not all of them are going to want to like you. Not all of them are going to like you. You're not here to be liked. So just please remember that when you're talking with a student, especially if you think that they're down or depressed, don't be pushy. Pushy is a guaranteed way to lose your rapport with that student, however much of it you have. And it's also a guaranteed way that, if you had something that you didn't really feel like talking about and someone kept trying to pump you for information on it, how would you feel? You'd be like, no, I'm not going to tell you a thing. I'm just going to keep it to myself and I'm not talking to anyone. So not only does it make it harder for you, it makes it harder for everyone else, especially if you are concerned about a student's well being. So that being said, don't be pushy. That's really what it comes down to. Um, Everyone's got their secrets. Everyone's got their things they want to talk to. If you really think there's an issue, I would, I try not to commit things to email. I prefer to talk to people in person. That's not only is it, I think, a better way to develop rapport and relationships with your coworkers and students and any other staff in your building, parents, the like. It's also a way of, and I hate to put it in this terminology, but I can't really think of a better way to say it, is to cover your own rear end. Anything that you write in an email can be directly quoted, and it's, once you've said it, that's it. So it is, I think, much better to do things in person. It's a way of covering your own behind, and it also just makes the conversation flow better. There's no reason to get caught up in a 30 reply email chain. It doesn't make any sense. Talk in person. The issue's over in 5 minutes. Get out of your classroom, go talk to someone. Um, that's one of the biggest mistakes. Don't let yourself get caught in your classroom. Don't get yourself stuck in your classroom when you need to talk to someone. Um, it makes things tougher for you. So take the time, build those relationships, and then move on to this, which is I'm going to start off with the phone call, what it's like making a phone call, and how I do it. I'll kind of run you through a little bit of a script, just a generalized script, which is almost the exact same thing as sending an email. So here's what we're going to talk about. Making a phone call. First off, I try and make phone calls from school. Okay. It's better that you make it from a school number because it'll show up. When you call home, if they have caller ID or anything else, it'll show up as a number that they might recognize versus using your own personal phone, which I already will say is a bad idea. Um, if you're absolutely forced to use your personal phone, make sure you do *67 so that they don't see your number. It'll if you use *67, for those of you who don't know, it will block your number from caller ID, and you'll just show up as a restricted number. That way, they don't have your personal phone number. Um, it's just a way of being more secure and not having a parent calling you to bug you, or if you end up in somehow a really bad situation, getting harassed or anything like that. It's always keep your personal information personal. Don't give it out. I have business cards that I got printed that I use in my district. Um, they don't have any of my personal information on it. My address is the school. My phone number is the school. My email is the school. It's just a way to be safe. You don't really want to have any connection outside of work unless it's someone that you already know and it happens to be a student that you know the family well and they already know you not as a teacher. So things to think about. So phone calls, here's what happens. The first thing that you need to do is you need to identify yourself. Okay. So when I make a call, the first thing I'll say is, "Hi, this is Mr. Distract Teach from, Nunsuch High School. Do I have the whatever family on the line here or anything like that? Am I speaking to so and so?" Because you want to verify, right? You don't want to be violating any HIPAA issues, privacy for students by giving out personal information or anything to someone who is not authorized to know it. So you need to be careful with that. Don't just immediately call and start gushing out or anything like that. The reason that I don't say ask if it's the correct residence first or ask who you're talking to first is because this is the person that's picking up the phone. They don't know who you are. You could be a telemarketer for all they know. So ID yourself first, then ask if you have the correct person or address. Um, so that would be the first thing. The second thing that I always do is I tell them what my reason is for calling. And I do this very concisely. I don't elaborate on it right away because I have another thing that I want to ask. So I'll say, "Hi, this is Mr. Distract Teach from Nunsuch High School. Do I have so and so's residence?" And they'll say yes, and I'll say, "Oh, okay. I was just calling because I had a concern about little Jimmy. And did I get you? Is this an okay time to talk?" Give them the option to tell you, "No, this is not a good time. Can I contact you later? Can you contact me later? Can you email?" Those sorts of things. Gives them the opportunity. It also makes it so that they're more relaxed because if you just start going right off, they might be in the middle of doing something, right? You have no idea what they're doing when you call. They could be sitting down to eat and anything. If you impose yourself on that parent, you're automatically at a disadvantage. Imposing yourself on a parent will automatically cast you in more of a negative light because you're an annoyance instead of someone that's helping them. It just automatically sets the wrong tone on a phone call. So make sure that you're gracious. Don't be pushy, anything like that. So ID yourself. Reason for calling. Is this a good time? Then tell them what your concern is or your positive piece of information. You don't just have to call home when you're having a problem. You can call home to say, "Oh, Jimmy is doing an awesome job in class. Did he tell you about this project he's working on? I can't wait for him to take it home," yada, yada, yada. It's a good way to also make positive connections. So do that. Okay, tell them what your reason for calling is. Okay, outline whatever you need to talk about. If you have a problem, discuss a solution. Okay. Then I would say, and this can vary depending on how your phone call goes, you need to make sure you give them time to ask you questions, right? This is a parent. If they're involved, they're going to want to know more. They're going to want some details. That way they have a better idea of what you need from them. So give them the opportunity to ask questions. Okay? Let the parent speak. Do not talk over them. Do not interrupt them. Let them speak. Wait for a pause, and then say what you need to say. Okay? And that also puts less pressure on you. I've never had a bad phone call with a parent. Every parent I've ever talked to has been absolutely wonderful. You can tell the difference in how they handle discipline at home, all these sorts of things, just from the tone of their voice and the way that they talk to you. You can tell how strict they are. You can tell whether even what they're doing is working or not. Some parents will be like, oh, I don't know what to do with this, with my kid. I have no idea. I've tried everything. Sometimes they might even ask you for advice on something that might help them. I've had that happen once or twice. And that can be a huge deal. That's a great way to make a connection with a parent, right? But don't offer that up otherwise, because then it can be perceived as you telling them that they're a bad parent. So remember, be gracious. Don't be overbearing. Don't impose on the parent. Avoid teacher lingo. Okay, some of us don't even know when we're using it. It happens. It's not a big deal, but it's better if you don't have to explain a term to a parent, unless it's very, very pertinent to what you're talking about. So that would be something to keep in mind. Now, I don't make phone calls home when it comes to, like I talked about, issues that should be given to a counselor or a guidance office or anything like that. I only call home for positive things, and I only call home for behavioral sort and disciplinary sorts of things. You are, as much training as we have as teachers, you are not a social worker. You are not licensed as a social worker. You are not qualified as a social worker. We know how to handle these things in our classrooms, but for larger issues, you need a guidance counselor involved. You may be asked to get a guidance counselor involved, or you may need to get a counselor involved, and that counselor might ask you to sit in on a phone call. But don't be the one that's making a phone call saying, oh, I think your son's depressed. I think your daughter's depressed. I think this. I think ADHD. I think that. That's a guaranteed way to get yourself in trouble. Guaranteed. Don't do it. We can definitely tell things. We know, as teachers, we can tell, especially if the student has an issue that's they are medicated or not. You can tell, over time you gain the ability to see patterns and gauge things, but you are not qualified to diagnose. You are not qualified to have that conversation with a parent. You are qualified to express your concerns to a guidance counselor. You are qualified to talk to a parent about an issue that is disciplinary. Don't start getting into social work. It's not your job. And sometimes I would even think it might make it worse. So please keep that in mind. Another thing to keep in mind as well is a lot of families out there, the parents are separated, there are step parents, all these different things. Before you make a phone call, do your research. You might need to call 2 times about one student, because there are places where the legal agreement says anything that is said to one parent needs to be said to the other. And you need to abide by that. So things to think about. So phone calls, it sounds like a lot. It's really not that big of a deal. Most parents are more than willing to help. I've actually found a lot of step parents are some of the most helpful people ever, because they want to feel, especially if they're a newer step parent, they want to be accepted by that child, right? Everyone, all the, Disney movies and all this is, oh, the evil stepmother, the evil stepfather, these sorts of things. That's really not the case. They're just people like anyone else. You never know what the dynamic is between one half of the family or the other. Everyone's different. I have, in general, just from my experience, the step parents tend to be some of the most willing to help because they want to, for lack of a better term, they want to score points with the kid and with their spouse. They want to feel like more of a parent. They don't want to feel like an outsider. Um, so you have to make sure, obviously, that that step parent is authorized as a person that you can talk to, right? Check your information, do your research before you even pick up that phone. Know what you need to talk about, know what you need to say. Take notes, whatever you got to do. And then the last thing, um, take notes while you're on the call. Okay, that way, if anyone asks, you have a record of what you talked about. Um, you can always type whatever your notes are, and if an administrator knows that you're calling home, or if it's a issue that you've shared with more than one teacher who are also concerned, and you just happen to be the one who's making the phone call, this way you can share everything with them. Keep everyone in the loop. You don't just want to be isolated and have the parent talk to you and then another teacher call them the same day. Be hey, what do you? I already talked about this with Mr. Distract Teach yesterday. Why are you calling me? Didn't he talk to you? Yada yada yada. Coordinate. That's what it comes down to. So that's making phone calls. Emails are very similar. I'm going to put something up on the screen here. I typed up a short email kind of format that is basically the same as making a phone call, but you need to be well written. You can't have typos, and don't be using emojis and smiley faces and all this stuff in a professional email. So let me bring that up on the screen and we'll continue. Okay, so this is a email template that I just made up quickly. This is generally what I would use for my very first contact with a parent. This is how I verify that I've even got the correct contact information for that parent and that they're checking their email. There's no reason to type a huge long essay just to have it go to the wrong person or nobody if they don't check their email. So you start off, obviously, make sure you've got the correct email address from your system. Look it up. Only use an email address that is in your system because the only way you can verify that it's the actual person that you're talking to. So that's the first thing. Second, in your subject line, okay, use the student's first name. Don't bother with the last name. It doesn't make sense, right? Why does the parent need to know that what their child's last name is? They already know. They know who their kid is. So say that, and then 1 to 3 words in the subject line about what the email is. Okay, you don't have to make it all caps. I just happened to do that when I did this. Give them their greeting, hello, Mr., Miss, Ms., Mrs., verify what they would want to be called. That way you don't have any minor faux pas. Make sure you've got the correct name. Just because of a student has a last name doesn't mean that the parent has the same last name. That happens quite often. Jimmy Smith could have a father that's Jimmy Douglas. You never know. So start off with a greeting. Identify yourself, right? I'm Jimmy's creative woodworking teacher at Nonsuch High School. Tell them why you're calling, right? This is all the same stuff we did in the phone call. Then just, let them know what the reason is that you are contacting them. In this case, I'm saying, Jimmy is maybe a little bit of a scatterbrain, but I'm not actually saying that. We frequently have to remind him to wear his safety glasses, and he's having difficulty understanding why he can't be having horseplay in the shop. He's going to slip and crack his head open. He's going to push someone into a saw because he can't keep his hands to himself, that kind of stuff. You've already, at this point, talked with Jimmy. And he knows very well what is expected of him and what his responsibilities are, and he still has not been able to make that happen, whatever you've asked of him in the past in a one-on-one conversation, right? Correction in front of the whole group of students is not the same as taking a student aside and talking to them. You need to do that before you contact home. Ultimatums are also not a good idea with a student, but we will get to that in another video. So you also want to make sure that you're not being accusatory or anything like that. You're not writing this email to bash it on a student, right? You're not here to accuse, you're not here to complain, you're here to resolve something that is troubling you. So take a neutral tone. It's the best way to go. The parent can lead from there. So you outline what you've already done so that they know you're not just a whiny teacher, right? Keep yourself in a positive light, right? This whole process is supposed to be positive. You're working together to solve a problem for the student's best interest. So you can do that. If you CC'd someone in an email, make sure you've mentioned who you've CC'd and why. If I've got a guidance counselor in the mix, I might say I CC'd this person who is his guidance counselor just so that they're in the loop, right? Keep it very informal, not like this is a whole serious thing you're bringing a million people into, unless that is the case, which I generally wouldn't do because that's not your responsibility. If there's something serious enough that you have to really have an email conversation with administrators and counselors and a whole bunch of people in one medium, that is something that's not your responsibility to set up. That's the responsibility of the counselor or administrator involved. And that would usually be an actual in-person meeting anyway, so that there's no miscommunication. It helps keep things more positive. So you can tell the parent what you've already done, right? That way they know it's not just an issue with you. So in this case, I said I contacted Jimmy's other teachers and checked with the vice principal. And it seems that this is a new behavior for Jimmy. This isn't something that Jimmy was doing last year. It's something that's cropped up recently. So I just wanted to let you know that this is happening and make you aware of it. I'm just looking for your help, and anything you can tell me or do to help is greatly appreciated. And then leave your contact info. Even though you're emailing them from your school email account, give it to them again anyway, just in case. You never know how internet or web savvy someone is. I've mentioned somewhere along the line, I am not a computer whiz by any means. I know just barely enough to get by. So give them that and give them your school phone number that they can contact you on. If you have an extension, give them an extension. Let them know how to contact you. One of the things I do at the beginning of the school year, since I got business cards, is with the course syllabus at my high school, I attach my business card to the syllabus. That way it goes home and they have a way to contact me. So these are all things you can think about. Lastly, thank them for their time and just sign off. At this point, you can wait for a reply. That's when the parent will ask their questions, and you can then provide detail now that you've confirmed that this is indeed the correct person that you're talking to. And that's it. There's really not a whole lot more to it. It's crazy looking at this. I've taken a 5-minute sort of thing and turned it into almost 25 minutes. There's a lot of little nuance to it. That's why I spent so long on it. But when you really boil it down, if you've been taking notes, the general point is just be clear, concise, and correct. Get your point across. Don't be accusatory. Form a bond with that parent. And make sure that you've done your due diligence before you bring the parent into it. Last thing you need is to be someone who lets any issue go outside of your classroom where you now have no control over it. It shows a sign of weakness to your bosses, it shows a sign of weakness to the parents, and it shows a sign of weakness to the students. So do everything you can in-house. And lastly, don't be afraid to hang up. Don't be afraid to end the call. 99.9% of the calls you have are going to be positive. You will not have a bad experience. In that 0.1% that a parent either starts getting very agitated with you, they start calling you names, something like that. It hasn't happened to me, luckily, so I haven't had that issue. But don't be afraid to end the call. Tell that parent, okay, I see that, this conversation isn't going to be getting us anywhere at the moment. So I am going to hang up, and we can further discuss this at another point in time. At that point, you can hang up the phone and then immediately, and I can't stress this enough, immediately take your notes, any correspondence you've had with this parent about this issue, send it to your administrator so that you're covering your own rear end. Okay. Once a parent becomes verbally abusive on the phone or anything like that, your job shifts from being a partner with that parent to crisis management. Okay, you are trying to defuse the issue that you're having. If it is at a point where you don't believe you can defuse it, that's when you now need to end the call, end the email, and get your administrator involved immediately. Make a paper trail. Earlier in this video, I said avoid the paper trail. It's true. In general, I would avoid the paper trail. But when things become adversarial, you need a paper trail so that no one can misquote you or say that you did something or said something that you didn't. You need to keep a record. And that's on your side because that protects you, it protects your school, it protects the child, it protects your administrator, and it puts the ball in your opponent's court. It's an unfortunate truth, but it does happen. So that being said, I hope this video is helpful for all of you newbies out there. There will be more coming. And please, if you feel that this video was worthy of your like or subscription, please subscribe. I appreciate it very much. I hope that once I get higher in subscriptions, it will give me more options with YouTube that I can produce higher quality videos on even better subjects. So thanks again for tuning in. We'll see you next time.